All right, today's episode is kind of highly requested. For as long as I can remember, one of the most asked questions that we have received is all about money mindset books, which ones are Arash's favorite, what he's learned from them, what he would recommend. So we're going to jump into the best of the best money mindset books, your biggest takeaways from them, your different perspectives on them, and I think it's going to be a fun episode.
Let's go.
All right, so what was the first mindset book that you didn't just like, it changed the way you approached?
It was Think and Grow Rich. That was the first book I studied on money. And I remember I was studying the chapter on autosuggestion and faith, and I'm in the corporate world at this time. And I remember I was reading it every day. Every night I'd come home and I was reading it, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a coach, and I am going to earn, at that time I said, $500,000 a year. And I just believed everything that Hill wrote. And I just told myself, I just got to follow this. He just said there's 6 steps, 7 steps of what to do. And then you've got to make a decision. So like I was religiously following what Hill wrote in that book. And that changed my vision. That was the one book that changed the direction of where I was going.
Someone who's just getting started into mindset work, is that the book you would recommend?
Well, that was the book that did it for me to start me. So I would say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people reference that book. Bruce Lee was obsessed with it. Like he referenced it. Like, I mean, I can name thousands and thousands of people. Like Hill impacted so many people with his teachings. But that was the book that I remember writing out exactly how Hill defined. And now I've well surpassed anything I wrote back then. But that was the book that started me on my voyage of really being obsessed with books. And really, books are so great, Mike. Like, it's like when somebody writes a great book, the author is right with you.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like they're in real time with you. Like you're having a mentorship discussion with them once you learn how to read books in a certain way, instead of just gathering the information.
Well, in Think and Grow Rich specifically, that's one of the most quoted, most read personal development books on the planet, I would say. What is one of your biggest takeaways?
I mean, I'll say the most underrated chapter in this book.
Okay.
I will say the most underrated chapter is the chapter on persistence.
Yes.
I rarely hear somebody come to me and say, you know, that chapter on persistence changed the game. It's the longest chapter in the book, and there's a reason. Persistence is essential for us to achieve our goals. But the quote in the book that changed my life was on decision. He said, after interviewing 500 of the most successful people in the world, the one common denominator is decision making. He said, the winners make decisions fast and change them slow. And I remember at that time, I was the opposite, because I didn't have the self-esteem and the identity, and I would always need approval from other people. But once I started reading that, it was like, that's what I was doing. Mm. And then I lost my job, and I made decision before evidence. Like I bet on myself. Like these are all decisions that I made, and I always give Think and Grow Rich what activated that in me before I ever met my mentor, who Bob Proctor had an enormous impact on my life. And the funny thing about it, because we're talking about it, that was the book he studied every day for 56 years.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get right to the essence of the most asked question, which is, what are your top 5, maybe 7 personal development books, mindset books?
Science of Getting Rich is number 1 for me.
Okay.
That had the greatest impact in my thinking and in changing my states. So the Science of Getting Rich, Neville's work I'm obsessed with. Power of Awareness with Awakened Imagination. I have it on my desk. I study different parts of it every day. You² was another home run for me. I've studied that book over 1,000 times. Psycho-Cybernetics changed my understanding of self-image. Like I used to shrink around when a part of my self-image was not good, but that changed my whole relationship. That book was had such an enormous impact on me for this one area. Once I read it, I stopped beating myself up.
Which one is that?
Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz.
Yeah.
those are my top 4 that I'm thinking of right now.
And then Think and Grow Rich makes it 5.
Think and Grow Rich would make it 5. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't say that.
Yeah. Well, we'd already talked about that one. So, okay. So let's jump into them one at a time. Science of Getting Rich. You said it's the #1 book for you. Changed your life drastically. By the way, I feel like I can hear Amazon checkout carts right now. People just like adding these to cart, which please do. These are all 5 incredible books. What about Science of Getting Rich made it so impactful for you?
It changed how I thought. Waddles talks about there's 2 people could be in the same vocation and one is crushing it while the other is struggling. Why is one crushing it? Because they think in a certain way. And there is the first principle of the Science of Getting Rich changed my relationship to attitude. That's how I changed my attitude. For 2 years, I studied these 4 paragraphs in this book every day, and I became every word of it. Mm-hmm. I never stopped because I was the person who would always go up when things were great, then down when things weren't. So I was basically the opposite of everything I teach. And one day I was talking to my mentor, Bob Proctor, and I said, I'm stuck. He said, why do you think you're stuck? And I said, I'm letting the results control me. He said, well, that's a dumb idea. And he said, Arash, I'm going to teach you something my mentor taught me. And I said, what is it? And he said, anyone can have a great attitude when things are going well. He said, the true pros in life have an even better attitude when things are not going as well. And I said, I got it. And I went and I studied those 4 paragraphs in the first principle of the Science of Getting Rich. And I studied them every day, and my attitude took off.
When you say every day, it was every day for like 2 years, I think.
2 years, every day. Yeah. Like it was a habit, every day. But I didn't just study it once. I had it where I would study it 5 times a day. I would literally by hand write out those paragraphs. And it would take me like an hour because I was like, I'm done chasing. Mm-hmm. I want to understand this because at this time I had created great results, but I didn't feel great because I'd be going up or down. I wanted to be in that neutral state. And that's what attitude is, where you're not letting the circumstance control you. And that's where the Science of Getting Rich had such an enormous impact on my life.
Okay, so let's say someone has not read Science of Getting Rich yet, or maybe they have, but they just read it front to back. What is your recommended reading plan for Science of Getting Rich?
I mean, mine is the first principle of the Science of Getting Rich. So it's chapter 4. I'm giving you the same thing my mentor gave me. And then it's chapter 7 on gratitude. And then chapter 14 on the impression of increase. I remember one day Bob and I were talking, and he says, you want me to tell you the real secret, how to never worry about money again? And I said, yeah, I would love that. And he said, study the impression of increase every day for 30 days. So I studied it. And the impression of increase, that chapter is about leaving every single person better off than you found them. So he called it, at the time when he was speaking to me about it, he said, this is the wealth formula, chapters 4, 14, and 7. He had me do them in those order, 4, 14, then 7. I never asked him why in those orders, but I just followed it.
So good. Okay, let's jump into the power of awareness. Why?
The power of awareness is just like a PhD on effortless success. My favorite chapter in that whole, because it's a mix of different books in it, but it's The Coin of Heaven is my favorite chapter. And there was one paragraph, kind of like I did the Science of Getting Rich, I did with The Coin of Heaven. It says, man attracts what he is. And I remember this chapter, he says, how would you speak audibly had you achieved your goal? And I remember I was like, oh my God, I'm so in conflict right now because I have this goal. I know I'm going to get there, but I'm not speaking of already having it. So like that paragraph is gold. Mm-hmm. And the coin of heaven is like you're either living heaven or hell in your life, but your inner dialogue dictates your state. So it really got me in control at a much higher level of my thinking, of being aligned with what I want instead of kept sending out double binding messages. One day it'd be great, sending out great messages. The next day I'm focusing on the results, bad messages. So, but Neville really, if you want to create success effortlessly, you can't afford not to have this in your library.
Okay, so for this book's reading plan, would you say study Coin of Heaven and then read the whole book?
It depends where you are. Like, I don't read whole books.
Yeah.
I read based on my gaps or what I want to strengthen. So this book, you could go to any chapter based on where you are.
Okay.
You know, everyone's at a different place. But I think it is one of the best books ever written, ever.
I wanted to share one quick thing and then we'll get right back to the show. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've probably realized that the conversations that we have here are different from most of the content online. We're not focused on quick tactics or surface level motivation. The work that we do at Voss Coaching Co. is centered on identity, thinking, and processes that actually create lasting results. That is one of the things we are so passionate about and one of the reasons we started this podcast and Voss Coaching Co. to begin with. Many of the people who work closely with us first discovered us through this podcast. They listened for months, sometimes years, and eventually reached a point where they realized they didn't just want more information, they wanted direction and proximity. If that resonates with you, I would love to invite you and encourage you to reach out to our team. Send us an email to hello@vosscoachingco.com. Introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about what you're doing, what your goals are, what you're working towards, and our team will personally review your message and connect with you to see if there's an opportunity for us to help. Again, that email is hello@vosscoachingco.com. All right, now right back to the episode.
Next up, You².
Well, You², I have a relationship with it because I was struggling at the time I first got it. I remember I had lost my job at this time. This is before I met my mentor, so I hadn't gotten any direction. And I was wanting to create a quantum leap. I loved the idea of this book, and I loved the idea because the book was 30 pages.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of like that too. And I would just read it front to back, front to back, front to back. And I just got obsessed with the idea of quantum leaps. I'm still obsessed with it. That's why one of our core foundational coaching programs called Quantum Leap Coaching, because what I discovered with the implementation of the ideas that Price Pritchett had, that a quantum leap is our birthright. So I have a very close connection to it because, and I still study it because quantum leaps are what I think everybody should be achieving every 90 days. I mean, you have 3 wins over 90 days. That's 5 days a week. That's 194 and a half wins. Who's not going to create a quantum leap? Quantum leaps are a lot easier than people understand.
Yeah.
And so Pritchett's book was about stretching, you know, and that's what I did at that time. And he always said, once you stretch, you never go back to the original state. And there was nothing more accurate. But there was this quote in there that I tell everybody about still. In U², he says, the absence of evidence isn't the evidence of absence. Now, I have a story about this.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, I'm stuck. And I'm talking to my mentor, Bob Proctor. And I said it again, which I don't know why I kept telling him I was stuck. But I have multiple times I told him that. And he said, what's wrong? I said, I'm used to creating a quantum leap every 90 days. And he said, how do you know you're not in one? And I said, the results. He said, oh, so you're going to let the results make your decisions. And I knew, I was like, oh, shit, I'm going the wrong way with him. Yeah. And then he quoted Pritchett. He said, the evidence of absence isn't the absence of evidence. And Bob said to me, he said, do you trust me? And I said, yes. He said, then focus all your attention on what you want. Because you might be in a quantum leap, you don't even know it. And then weeks later, my quantum leap showed up. But it was like, I don't think if we have that conversation, I think I sabotage myself. I don't think it happens.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm telling you, like, reading these books are gold.
Yes.
But it's not just reading them. I implemented it.
You study it and you implement it. Like, you don't just read it, you study it and you implement it.
No, and I'll study sentences. I'll study paragraphs. I don't study all these books at once. Mm-hmm. You know, there's another book that we didn't even talk about, but it just brought it to my mind because when I was obsessed about changing my attitude was a book by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone. They wrote this book together. It's an old book, Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. Yeah. You know, but the interesting thing, we've had so many transformations through our book, Transform.
Yes.
And the way I envision it, and it showed up that way, I wanted it to be a study guide. And it just changes the game because you could study any chapter in our book. If you have an identity problem, go study identity, but study it every day for 90 days. And there's so many once you learn a book is a study manual, instead of you have to go start to finish, a good book, if you're really studying it the right way, you'll study it for a year. Instead of picking up all these books, because that's just gathering information. Not that there's not benefit in it, but there's not the benefit you could do by really studying in a certain way. Studying first, we have to understand what it is. If we're going to really give everybody listening to this the benefit of this, studying is getting intellectually involved with an idea, then getting emotionally involved. So you get emotionally involved, you're like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do it. Then you step out and act. And the change of results will tell us whether we learn. But that's why I'm giving you all these examples of like what I intellectually got involved with, then I got emotionally involved, then I step out and acted on them. And that's why the change of result happened.
So good. All right. Psycho-Cybernetics.
I'm obsessed with identity. Like if I was doing this work all over again from the beginning when I was failing, I would have just went all in on identity. We've created a wealth movement with our audience because identity is everything. And Psycho-Cybernetics, Maltz was a plastic surgeon. He couldn't understand why he'd give them this new face or new different look, and they'd come back and they didn't notice anything different. Then he got into self-image psychology and he started teaching it all over the world. For me, that's where everything changes. Until you change the identity, the results are not going to change. We can never outperform our self-image. So if somebody's struggling with self-image right now, this is the book.
Is there one idea that you really took away from the book?
I mean, there's so many. There's so many good ones, like how to activate your success mechanism. The quote I just said, like I've been quoting for 21 years, you can never outperform your self-image. You can change it, but you can't outperform it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many nuggets in there that are just genius. Like we're having, my wife and I, for our summer reading with our kids are 12 and 14. We're having them, that's the book they're studying.
I love that. Love that. Okay, so we've mentioned 7 books so far. I'll go over them one more time. Think and Grow Rich, Science of Getting Rich, You², Psycho-Cybernetics, Power of Awareness.
Power of Awareness.
There was one more that you mentioned.
Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude.
And Transform. So there's all 7 books listed together. I do want to mention, though, because this is probably the number one question that we get, and I don't think it's just us. I think this is the number one question across the board in the personal development, self-help industry. Do you think that is because people are obsessed with gathering information?
Yeah, they love it. They love it.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to do the work. But I read. I feel productive. The reading doesn't change you. It's the implementation that changes you. That's at the identity levels where change happens.
Yeah.
So, if you haven't listened to our episode on how to reprogram your subconscious mind, you got to go watch it.
Right.
Listen to it. That is so essential, and they work so closely together. There's another book that I didn't even mention. See, now, like faith is so important in success. The best book I've ever studied on faith was by Robert Russell, and it's called God Works Through Faith. Yeah. You can still get it in print. It's not easy to get, but it is the single best book you will ever study on faith.
Okay, so what is the best way to bulletproof yourself, not to keep gathering information, not to order these books and let them be shelf help, but to truly start implementing them?
Look at where you are now and where you want to go. Where is the gap? Is it identity? Psycho-Cybernetics. Mm-hmm. Is it discipline? Science of Getting Rich. Is it really creating a blueprint on wealth? Think and Grow Rich. Think about where you are.
Is it like if you're hitting a glass ceiling, you would go to You²?
Yeah, if you're thinking too small, You². If you were hitting a glass ceiling, I'd say Psycho-Cybernetics.
Okay.
If you are grinding, any of Neville's work. Power of Awareness with Awakened Imagination has all of it in one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, but we've got to bulletproof this so we become it. Gathering information does not create transformation. Who you decide to become and step out and act as that person before you're ready, that's when everything is going to change.
Is there something that you do different when you're studying a book that you think most people miss?
Yeah, I think so. And I give my mentor all the credit for it because he taught me how to study. And I will read just paragraphs, but I'll read it 5 times a day.
Right.
And then I don't move on. I mean, I do not move on until it's a part of my identity.
And I know you well enough to know that when you sit down to read a book, you have an intention. You're thinking of a goal, you're thinking of a project, you're thinking of something specific before you even start reading. Before
I even read, I write out my goal. Why I do that is because the ideas in the books are I'll go on this thought that is connected to my goal.
Yeah.
So it's whenever I write, it activates that.
So good. All right. This was a fun episode. We should do this again. I'm sure there's like 20 more books you could think of. Those are 8 of the very best. So go ahead and get those 8 books, but don't just gather information. Make sure that you implement them. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. And if you did enjoy it, go ahead and share this on social media with your friends and family. And we'll see you next week with another episode of the 7-Figure Standard podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Figure Standard. We hope you found the insights and strategies helpful on your journey to success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform to help us reach more people like you. To learn more about Arash and Mikey and how Voss Coach & Co. can help you achieve your goals and reach new levels of success, visit vosscoachandco.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 7-Figure Standard.